Hey guys, Fox up here with a mini rant video on the proposed Lee Sin changes. Now originally I didn't really want to do this video because firstly, I'd already covered the topic on my social media and I didn't really feel like this was worthy of a video. So if you want to get involved in these kind of discussions or just to see what I have to say, then I would suggest that you follow me on my Facebook or my Twitter. I'll put the links to those in the description. You can join in the conversations and I'd love to see you there. And the second reason why I didn't want to do this video is because there's been such a huge community uproar about these changes that I would be very shocked if they went through. I would be pretty surprised if I went ahead with these changes. So to that extent, I'm not actually going to be talking about any of the changes in detail or specifically. I'm just going to be talking about why I think in theory it is a bad idea to change Lee Sin. But I will link the changes in the description, so if you want to read them for yourself, that's where they'll be. So Riot's reasoning for why they wanted to change Lee Sin is that they feel he has too much power in the early game and he has the ability to really just stomp a game by himself, and then that he falls off too hard later on. Now I kind of think in theory this isn't necessarily a bad idea. I mean, you don't want someone being, uncounterably strong at one stage of the game and then just being, useless in comparison later on. But I don't really think that, firstly, I don't really think that that's necessarily the case, and secondly, I don't necessarily feel like this is even a bad thing. I think that the, issues that Riot have brought up, or the reasoning behind why they're doing these changes, aren't even really issues at all, in my opinion. I think it's a fair way for Lee Sin to be constructed. I think that's fine. The fact that someone is very good early on, and then weaker later on. For most players as well, Lee Sin is one of those champions who has one of the highest skill caps in the game. I don't really think that you can disagree with that. I know I've seen a few comments on my videos where people say, I don't think Lee Sin is that hard. I think it's quite easy to play actually. And I just have to disagree with that, because if you think Lee Sin is easy, then you must think every other champion in the game is easy. I mean, fair enough, you don't find Lee Sin hard, but then you can't find anyone else hard either in the game. And I mean, if that's the case, then just look at it comparatively. Comparatively, Lee Sin is a hard champion to play. So for most players, they won't even really be at the point where they can stomp those early games. I mean, only the people who are very, very good with Lee Sin and who have mastered him will be able to consistently destroy those early games. Even good Lee Sin players won't be single-handedly destroying those games on a regular basis. Even those that have mastered him will find that in certain situations, it just doesn't happen. Sometimes games don't go your way, but on the other hand, sometimes games do go your way and you do end up stomping that game. But I feel like there is a reward in that. I feel like by being so strong in that early game, that is all your hard work putting into playing Lee Sin, to learning Lee Sin, to mastering him. All of that hard work is being paid off by you being able to stomp and dominate that early game. And I think it's only fair that he falls off really hard later on, because if he can have that much impact early on, then of course he's not going to be as strong later on. I mean, I think that's fair. And so if you have stomped early game, then you're not going to feel the effects of that falling off so much, which is what you want to happen. The better you do early, then the easier it is for you to not struggle through that late... Oh my goodness, I can't speak. The better you do early, basically, then the easier your late game becomes. That's really how it goes. And I'm just looking at the win ratios on Lee Sin in general. His win rate is around 48%, so he's not even at 50% win ratio. So it's not like a lot of people are stomping the early game when they're playing Lee Sin. And just because he has the potential to do that, do you really then have to change him so that he can't do that anymore? Like I say, I don't think that's a good idea, especially when you're considering the fact that the whole reason you can stomp early game is a reward. It's a reward for all the hard work you put into learning Lee Sin. The second reason why I don't really think that this is a good change in general, making his early not so impactful, making his late not so harsh, is because I think it's just strategy. There are loads of champions in the game. Every champion in the game has its strengths and its weaknesses. That's how it works. That's how it works in any form of competition. Anything like that, it's like a game of rock, paper, scissors, except slightly more complex, because there are over 100 champions. So Lee Sin is strong early and weak later on. So think about it this way, if you were to watch the LCS and one team picks a really, really good late game team comp, and so the other team thinks, to counter this, we're going to have to pick either a good late game team comp ourselves and just hope that we can outplay them, or we're going to pick a early game team comp and hope that we can snowball and pressure the early game enough that it doesn't reach late game so the enemy team can't reach their full potential. That is strategy. that is them strategizing their picks in order to best win that game. So say the early game team comp goes into the game and they stomp the late game team comp because, you know, early game they have the pressure and so they just destroy them. Now, is it really fair for you to say, oh no, we don't want that to happen, we don't want that early game, you know, the early game team had too much pressure early on and the late game team comp didn't really have enough power early on? Is that, you know, is that a bad thing? I don't think that's a bad thing. I think that's strategy. Likewise, if the early game team comp had gone into that game and they had not stomped the early game and, you know, then gone into a late game fight and just got obliterated because their team comp isn't very good later on and the enemy team comp is good later on. I mean, can you then say, oh yeah, this early game team comp didn't really have enough power later on? I don't think that's really fair. I mean, I don't really like that thing in general. Now I know that example that I just gave was a bit extreme and wasn't necessarily 100% true to what these Lee Sin changes are, but it's the same concept. You know, why would you want to do that? I mean, I don't necessarily feel as though it's a bad thing for Lee Sin to be really strong early on and then be not so strong later on. That's kind of my opinion. But the biggest point I want to make is just the whole thing of Lee Sin is hard to play, and the reason why he stomps games is because people take the time to master him and to learn him. I don't really think there is much of a case in arguing that Lee Sin is overpowered. I mean, a lot of the professional players in the community say that Lee Sin is one of the most balanced champions in the game. I mean, even Scar, who put it quite nicely, said that when you get destroyed by Lee Sin, it feels more like you are getting outplayed as opposed to you thinking that that champion is overpowered, which I think is probably the best way you want to be looking at things. So if it's not broken in that sense, why is Riot trying to fix it? And that's basically what I wanted to talk about on this topic, basically. But like I say, just go like my social media if you want to get my opinions on these kind of things in the future. Now, I'm sorry if I've rambled on too much or if you found this video quite boring. But I hope you found it useful somewhat, and if you did like the video, feel free to give it a thumbs up and leave your thoughts in the comments about what you think about the changes, or, you know, just these kind of things in general. But thanks very much for watching, guys. Hope you enjoyed the video, and we'll see you next time.